Implied powers. This is a very tough concept for many students to understand and also many adults to understand. What we have in the Constitution are express powers or enumerated powers. Express means they're expressly written into the Constitution where you actually can point at them and see them. Enumerated basically means the same thing. It's a numbered power that you can see. So if it's expressed or enumerated, that means it's written in the Constitution and you can see it. Congress has 18 powers that are expressly written in the Constitution, like the power to tax, the power to borrow, to raise an army, raise a navy, govern Washington, D.C., set weights and measures, regulate the post office and have the control of the post office, maintain the militia and make orders for the militia, bankruptcy laws, immigration laws. So there's 18 powers expressly written in the Constitution that Congress has the power. The President has powers of give the State of the Union, pardon, reprieves. If Congress can't determine a date to adjourn, they would set adjournment, call special sessions of Congress, appoint ambassadors and diplomats, and appoint judges. So these are expressed powers. Now, implied powers is really strictly for Congress, and there are those 17 powers of Congress. I said 18, but the 18th is the implied powers. It's the necessary and proper clause. So the Section 18 in Article 1, Section 8, with the powers, it says Congress shall make any law necessary and proper to carry out the express powers. So basically, Congress has the power to tax, Congress has the power to borrow money, to regulate interstate trade, to set weights and measures, and actually to create currency. So Congress has all these powers, but it didn't say anything about creating a bank. So the first Congress and the president, they signed in the First National Bank of the United States. Was this constitutional? Because it wasn't written in the Constitution. And the Supreme Court found, yes, it was. Later in 1819, there was McCulloch versus Maryland, which again put in the supremacy clause of the United States government over state government. States couldn't tax a national bank, but it again said that the implied power clause was real, and if it is expressing the express power as being implied, then it's fine. There are lots of different examples of implied powers. Social Security, Medicare, welfare, all of these are implied powers with the power to tax, power to regulate trade. Interesting thing in the civil rights movement, the power to basically for Congress to regulate trade, interstate trade, they used that to force hotel owners and restaurants and motels to actually take blacks. Blacks were not allowed to eat at a kitchen, or they weren't allowed to use the same facilities as whites. And Congress passed laws, civil rights acts, and basically used the Commerce Clause. So the Commerce Clause is commonly used to create laws and use the implied powers. Also, the power to taxes to do the same thing. With Obamacare, Supreme Court justices were looking at, was Obamacare legal? And they were looking at, was it the power to tax or the power to regulate trade? John Roberts said it was the power to tax. That gave Obama the power to do Obamacare. The other justices disagreed. They really said it was commerce. Insurance is commerce. But in either case, it was legal from the Supreme Court's point of view, and Obamacare was not unconstitutional. Now, there have been some unconstitutional laws. Congress made a law basically saying that schools were a gun-free zone, and especially in Texas. And Texas brought it to the Supreme Court, and Congress said, yeah, it might be a good law, and yeah, the law might make sense, but it has nothing to do with interstate trade. Having guns on campus has nothing to do with trade. There was another case regarding pay with women, also with Maine enforcing sheriffs to do background checks for gun purchases. All of these were a wrongful use of using the Commerce Clause to make an implied power and use it to create a law. So the Supreme Court does look at the expressed power. They do look at the implied power and see if it makes sense and see if there's actually any trade or any commerce going on. So implied powers is a strong power. It stretches the Constitution. It makes things where some people say, well, that's not in the Constitution, I couldn't do that. Thomas Jefferson had an issue with that because he basically was a big supporter of, if it's not in the Constitution, don't do it. But when he got into office, he actually did the Louisiana Purchase. Where is it in the Constitution written that he could purchase land and do that? It wasn't there, but it was implied. And that's basically with the inherent powers of actually setting your own territory and actually having a territory, and that's the federal government's responsibility. So I hope this makes sense, and this is implied powers, which are used to basically enforce and work with an expressed power of Congress.